Sorry for the delay. I got caught in traffic, but I'm ready whenever staff tells me they're ready to get started. Chloe, are you there?
I'm going to be standing in for Chloe today.
Right. Let me ask you a question. I know Mr. Bailey's not going to be here. I think Mr. Flug isn't going to be here either. Is that correct? I think.
That is my understanding. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. You tell me whenever y'all are ready.
I believe we're ready to start, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of Charleston Planning Commission meeting of July 21st, 2021. My name is Charlie Karrasch. I'm chairman of the commission. I'm going to read, since we're meeting via Zoom, I'm going to read the members of the commission who are going to be attending today. Ms. Laquita Bryant Jenkins, Ms. Erica Harrison, Ms. Donna Jacobs, Ms. Angie Johnson, Ms. Sunday Lemphasis, Mr. Harry Lassane, who's the vice chairman, and myself. Just so everyone knows, we are volunteers. We're appointed by Charleston City Council, and I know everyone joins me in thanking the commission members for their hard work on behalf of our city. The way we'll run this meeting is I will read an item into the agenda for the record. Staff will then report on that item and give us some recommendation, give us details. Then we'll ask anyone who's in favor of the application. Well, we'll ask for the applicant to say a few words. Then we'll ask anyone who's in favor of the application to speak if they'd like, or have written comments. Anyone who's opposed to the application, again, if they want to speak, if they've signed up to speak or have written comments. And then we'll give the applicant, if he would like to, a right to respond to any concerns. Then we'll close the public aspect of the hearing of that particular item, and the commission members will discuss and hopefully make a motion and vote on it. I would ask, Mr. Morgan, you here with us today, or is that?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to introduce any staff members who are participating today, as well as let us know if any items are deferred or anything else. Okay,
and I see Ms. Jacobs has her hand up.
Very quick question. I did not receive a link to any public comments that were written. Were there that I missed?
No, there are no written comments.
Thank you.
You go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you've introduced our planning commission, and our staff today are myself, Christopher Morgan. I'm the planning manager. Anna Harp, our senior zoning planner, is also here. Philip Overcash is here helping. Jim Hemphill will be taking Chloe's role today. Chloe is on a well-deserved vacation. And Marcy Grant is our clerk, and she will be helping us as is always. So we will move on, if you are ready, Mr. Chairman, into the first items.
I believe there's no items to be, I guess you've got one deferred under ordinance amendments. Is that the only thing?
Right, and we do have a rezoning that I'm going to give you all an update on late breaking kind of deferral situation on, but okay. we'll go through the agenda as advertised at present.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda under rezonings is number 1, properties on George Street, Society Street, and King Street, downtown Peninsula, TMS number 45704, 04, 007, 008, 112, 025, 113, and 017, approximately 1.74 acres, request rezoning from GB, general business, to mixed use workforce housing, MU2, WH. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this is a property that's commonly known, I think, with folks as the city's George Street lot, because the city had arrangements, leases, things like that in the past with the spaces here, and it was under common management with some other city parking lots, but the city did not actually own the land. It was privately owned, and it is in different ownership, I believe. I'll let the applicants explain all that, but it is currently a parking lot along with a couple of retail establishments, and we'll show those in a little bit more detail. One of the retail establishments comes out to King Street, as you can see by this map here. You all can see my cursor, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then there's another retail establishment that fronts on Society Street, and it goes all the way through between George and Society. Nearby uses include, of course, the King Street retail frontages, a new hotel that's going in at the corner of King and George on the northeastern corner there. The College of Charleston's physical education and basketball arena is up here to the northeast. There is a new large condominium building here to the east, and a hotel to the south. And that is the general character of the area. And I'm sure you all have encountered this lot many times in your travels in the downtown area. In our comprehensive plan, our current comprehensive plan, our Century 5 plan, this shows as urban core. So that's where our most intense categories go. So that's in line with the request. And then here are some aerial images. And again, you can see the surface parking lot there and the two storefronts that are a part of this. And then we have the oblique image of the property. And we have a street view from George Street into the property, and a street view from Society Street. And you see the retail building here on the right side that's part of it. And our recommendation is for approval based on the comprehensive plan and our analysis of the character of the area. And we recommend its approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Who are we going to hear from today, Mr. Hellman and Mr. Yates?
Chairman Karras, you're going to be hearing from Mr. Hellman today. Hi, I'm Brian Hellman.
Hey, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Hellman, 105 Broad Street. I'm here today representing GS Acquisitions and ENTSD LLC that own this collection of parcels. And I appreciate Mr. Morgan's overview of this. The property is currently zoned general business, and it's in the 6-story height district. The proposed zoning change is to keep it. We're not asking to change the height district. We're asking to change the zoning from general business to MU2 workforce housing. As Mr. Morgan stated, this rezoning is comprised of 6 tax parcels. They touch 3 different city right-of-ways: Society Street, King Street, and George Street. The piece that touches King Street, and there's a piece that touches Society Street, that's the old theater facade. Those buildings are going to remain exactly the same. Nothing's changing there, though their zoning will change or would change to MU2 under this application. Other than those buildings, these parcels have been used at least for well over 4 decades as a parking lot. I certainly recall going there as a small child and parking to go to Dumas to get clothes for school, or to Max's Men's Store to get my bar mitzvah suit tailored. So parking on this site is important, and it remains important to the King Street corridor. That's one of the reasons why we're here to talk about MU2 zoning. And part of my client's plan is actually to set aside about 70 parking spaces, if not more, for hourly parking use, and to continue that way. So parking will remain part of this project, and MU2, as I'll talk about in a bit, will help us reach that objective. As a real estate lawyer, I've learned a lot of things over the years, and one of them is it's actually more difficult to build residential in the city as opposed to commercial. On a large parcel such as this one with general business zoning, only a small fraction would be devoted to residential, leaving a substantial portion to be developed for other uses. In the case of this property, that use would likely be more commercial, whether it's multiple accommodations uses, office, and the like. The commercial office uses typically require a significant amount of business hours parking spaces. By our request, going to MU2, it would actually allow more residences to be developed, and those mix of uses actually create a balance in terms of commercial versus residential and when those parking spaces need to be used. So by building more residential, which is what we're trying to accomplish here, it would actually allow more parking than even the 70 spaces that are earmarked. That's really important for this site, as we talked about. And it would open up additional daytime parking to service the King Street areas. over the course of the past year, I've been working with the property owners in studying this as an infill development. And before the city, the planning commission made these recent MU workforce housing changes that allowed for this sort of tiered workforce housing, the development team had been exploring a planned unit development, a PUD, because part of their plan includes building about 10% or more workforce housing on this site. And as you recall, under the old MU workforce housing ordinance, if you didn't build at least 20%, you didn't get any credit for any workforce housing. So now that the tiered system is in place, where you go in those 5% increments, it really allows us to go the MU2 workforce housing route so that they can build some, if not all, of the various tiers and get some credit along the way for building more than 0, but less than 20%. So that ordinance change, and this may be one of the first requests that you're seeing since that ordinance change, I'm not sure, but this ordinance change, this recent ordinance change, really helps this project along and helps actually build some of the workforce housing that we've been that we're talking. So sorry, something's happening with my computer here that it keeps changing my screen. So basically, the uses that we're proposing tonight or for this site are all permitted under the current zoning. We're not asking for any type of special zoning. The MU2 uses and general business uses all allow the uses that would be built here as part of my client's development. And those basically uses are for rent housing, for sale, less commercial, and then of course some parking. So in summary, the application here is really about the merits of MU2 workforce. MU2 would allow this property to be developed in accordance with the underlying GB zoning, with the added benefit of increased residential uses, including workforce housing. No uses prohibited by GB are being introduced here by the zoning change, and no change is being requested to the Height District. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I hope that was a helpful overview of why we're requesting the MU2 zoning here over general business.
Thank you, Mr. Hellman. I see that we don't have anyone signed up to speak or written comments in favor, but there's a Mr. Barker that has some concerns. Is he available to us now?
Yes, sir, he is, and I'm gonna allow him to talk.
Okay, Mr.
All right.
Mr. Barker, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, great. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Jacob Barker. I'm an attorney. My office address is 225 Seven Farms Drive, Suite 207. That's out on Daniel Island. If my camera's not working, I apologize. It's just beyond my scope of expertise to make it work. But if I can get it going, I'll do that. I'm speaking on behalf of the Georgian Society Horizontal Property Regime. That's the homeowners association for the condominium development that was referred to earlier to the east of this project. On the screen right now, it's highlighted in gray. Thank you for whoever's highlighting it. So we're between King and Meeting and then Georgian Society. It's approximately 72 unit owner occupied condominium project with a parking lot. Mr. Hellman did a very nice job of laying out their plans, and I appreciate all the information. I also appreciate Mr. Hellman speaking with me today about the project. Unfortunately for us, it's at this point a timing issue and an unknown issue. And what I mean by that is the first we really got wind of this at all was over the weekend. And the first I was able to speak with Mr. Hellman about the project was today. Now, he's obviously very knowledgeable and been very informative and helpful to me to try to wrap my arms around this. But at this stage, even with all the information he was able to give me today, the HOA is just not in a position one way or another to support this type of rezoning, particularly because it seems that the workforce housing component may potentially add to some residential density that would, in our opinion, have potential impact on both the traffic, either coming and going from George or not coming and going from Society, as the case may be, as well as the parking, in the sense of we're not exactly sure how they're planning to get as many parking spaces as we're talking about. I understand there may be some subsurface parking, which presents its own set of problems. That all being said, we obviously want to continue a dialogue with Mr. Hellman and his client and look forward to doing that. It'd be our formal request for the record that the agenda item be deferred to the next month to allow us time to do that. But short of that, we're just not in a position to support it at this time. And if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to take them, but that's about it from us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barker. I see we also have a comment only from Brian Turner, is that correct?
Yes, sir. And all right, Brian, you should be good to go.
Turner,
Hi,
you go
can
ahead
y'all hear
when
me?
you're ready. Yes, sir, you
All
go
right.
ahead, Mr. Turner.
All right, good evening, Chairman Karish and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brian Turner. I'm speaking on behalf of the Preservation Society of Charleston tonight. And we're grateful to have had the opportunity to discuss this proposal in advance with Mr. Hellman. Overall, we support the request to rezone the property from general business to MU2, and we're especially pleased with the developer's commitment to dedicate 10% of the residential units for workforce housing. As this project moves forward, our key areas of focus will be the preservation of the historic building fronting Society Street and the treatment of the massing and height, including any request for additional height beyond the 6 stories allowed by zoning based on architectural merit. We're pleased to hear from Mr. Hellman that is not part of the current proposal. This project is situated directly behind the small-scale streetscape of Lower King Street, and it must be sensitive to that context. We also support the commitment to designate 70 parking spaces as public and urge that this be memorialized as a condition of project approval if feasible. So thank you for your consideration of our comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Turner, for your input, and we appreciate your comments. Mr. Hellman, would you like to respond? There's no one else signed up to speak on this, and there's no written comments. Mr. Hellman, would you like to respond to Mr. Barker or anyone else?
Mr. Karish, Chairman Karish, thank you so much. And first, we'd like to thank the Preservation Society for their support here. And as with respect to Mr. Barker's comments, Mr. Barker's client's property is the MU2 zone property that's to our east here. They have, I believe, 73 units on an area that's slightly under an acre. We're slightly under 2 acres. My client's actually proposing less than double that amount. So from a residential standpoint, will actually be less dense from a residential standpoint than what their zone. We're also asking for the workforce housing zoning, which would introduce a component of workforce housing as part of this project. We've had a number of neighborhood meetings. We met with Hannah, I want to say at least 3 times. We met with Charleston Village, who was helpful in giving us some good advice. One of which was, or one question they had for us was, "Why are you even meeting with us? You're not in our neighborhood." We met with the Mickey Group, which is, is a newly formed group of Middle King businesses and residents that are along King Street and surrounding side streets. Mr. Barker's client, it surprised us that when we found out today, they're not involved in any of those organizations, and they basically surround all this property. So we're again, I've told Mr. Barker, we're happy to meet with him. From a plan standpoint, our first step is just to get the zoning taken care of so we can determine what actually can be built on this site. Because if MU2 workforce is not an option for this site, then it's something that looks very different from what my client is proposing to build. So we hope that given we're asking for similar zoning to what his client's property has, plus the workforce component, that should hopefully suffice from the Planning Commission's standpoint. And I'm happy to happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have with respect to that. We think that's thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Hellman, and this will go, if whatever we do with it, if we approve it or whatever, to go to city council, which means you're more than willing to, I understand, meet with Mr. Barker and share information as well, correct?
Oh, of course. And in fact, we'll be scheduling a meeting with him sometime tomorrow. I couldn't meet with him actually tomorrow, but we'll schedule a meeting tomorrow. I'm out of town, but look forward to meeting with him and his association to talk about what our proposed plans are for this site. And of course, there's another public hearing before council and 3 readings of council before this could potentially become a zoning ordinance amendment anyway, if the commission were so willing to support us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hellman. That's going to close the public aspect of this. I'd ask commission members if they have any questions, comments, or a motion.
I have a question, Charlie.
Go ahead, Ms. Lampasas, you go ahead.
Mr. Morgan, would you just clarify what the difference is from the density standpoint for MU and the general business that it's currently zoned?
Sure. So GB is 26.4 units an acre, and the mixed use workforce housing does not have a density limitation. It's only limited by the heights in the area and what kind of a building can be configured on the site. And of course, any kind of building has to go through the BAR and all that kind of thing.
How many units are we looking at under the workforce housing for the site? Mr. Hellman?
Ms. Lampasas, probably, it depends on how many units are built. But the goal would be somewhere around the 10% mark. That's going to be somewhere between 10 units to 15 units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lampasas. Other questions, comments, or motion from commission members?
I saw Mr. Lassane had his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Lassane, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I will support the motion, and I am sensitive to the adjoining neighbor's concern about meeting with Mr. Hellman, and I take Mr. Hellman at his word that he will indeed reach out to and meet with those neighbors. I believe he will do that. I also would say that I think this is a very exciting proposal. I think it's a great use for that particular site, particularly if public parking can be maintained. As we've all seen in our recent city plan process, the addition of both workforce housing and market rate housing units are a desperate need in our city. And this is an appropriate place to build the kind of densities that Mr. Hellman and his clients have discussed building. So I think this is a solid proposal. As was mentioned, before this is approved, there'll be another public hearing and 3 readings at City Council. So there will be appropriate opportunity for the neighbors, whether they're the clients, at 21 George Street or at any other neighbors that have not gotten the word about this, they will have the opportunity to engage on that. So with that, I will move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. Any other questions?
I will second Mr. Lassane's motion.
Great, thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Any other comments, questions from commission members? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. This piece of property, as Mr. Lassane said, it's in the middle of everything. It's an exciting piece of property. It's an important piece of property. And it's nice to have some residents that'll be down there, as well as Mr. Lassane said, the needed housing for workforce housing. So with that, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison? Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Johnson?
Not sure if she's on the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. I hadn't seen her, so yeah. Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Great. And I'm in favor as well. So that is 6 in favor and none opposed. So that passes. The next item on the agenda is number 2 under rezonings, properties on Cumberland Street, Church Street, and Lingard Street, downtown Peninsula, TMS number 45805, 03, 089, 090, 091, 093, and 087. Approximately 0.68 acres, requested zoning from GB, general business and mixed-use workforce housing, MU2WH. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, and this is the item I alluded to that is being deferred by the applicant. And I'm going to read from a text I got. Applicants are going to submit a revised rezoning application later this week to add the removal of the accommodations overlay, which this property at present is part of the accommodations overlay and has a 50-room hotel already approved for it. They would be submitting additional requests to remove it from the accommodations overlay. So the hotel would not happen here. They worked this out, of course, with our staff, and they'll be submitting for the August meeting. And that this is something that, we feel good about because it's something we've heard from the neighborhood that they like the idea of the density here if the hotel can go away. So this has been submitted for deferral by the applicants.
So is it a deferral or is it just withdrawn for now? Is that?
It's a deferral. The same application will be before you next month, but it will have the additional aspect of removing the accommodations overlay on the site in addition to the underlying change from GB to MU2 workforce housing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morgan. Next item on the agenda is number 3, properties on Maybank Highway, Red Cove, Johns Island, TMS number 27900000029, 030, 031, and 035, approximately 10.6 acres, requested zoning of the Red Cove Plan Unit Development, PUD, Master Plan Development Guidelines to zone and rezone subject properties to PUD, Reds Cove. Subject properties are currently zoned commercial transitional to CT in the city of Charleston and PD, Plan Development, and Maybank Highway Corridor Overlay in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, and as you said, Mr. Chairman, some of this is already in the city. Some of this would be an annexation that has been kind of proceeding through the city process. Ms. Harp is going to give some details on this, but I was just going to give a quick overview with the slides and then let her kind of go into more details here. But again, the subject property is on Maybank. It is not far from the old Berkeley Electric Co-op offices, which are right in this location here. A key part of this site is the Tattooed Moose restaurant, which many of you may know on the Johns Island area. It is just to the west of the Habitat for Humanity resale store that's at Southwick and Maybank. And it is across the street also from where the Villages of St. John's Woods comes in. So if that gives you orientation to the site, this map shows both city zoning and county zoning. The overlay is the county's overlay that is in place. The solid colors are in the city here, and then the blue colors are in Charleston County here and would be annexed. And there's an adjoining PD also in Charleston County here. These properties are all in the city with GB and CT in this location. And then of course the old Berkeley Electric Co-op across the street is GO. This is in our Century 5 plan in the suburban areas. So that's, roughly 4 to 8 units an acre for residential development, and commercial development is appropriate along key corridors, things like that. Here is an aerial view of the property. You see the existing Tattooed Moose and then the vacant properties that are joining it. Here is a concept site plan layout. There would be townhouses as part of this development. Some of the key aspects are the connectivity here, which is part of our Johns Island plan from 2007. The east-west connectivity at the rear of the site adjacent to the wetlands. The connectivity between Maybank and that east-west connector are very important. And then there would be green spaces and common areas and the actual residential units in the rear. And of course, the Tattooed Moose would remain at the front, and there would be an additional parking area for the Tattooed Moose that would be adjacent to the PUD. And Ms. Hart can detail that a little bit more. This is just a land use plan that shows that the vast majority of the site is for residential uses, but there would be the commercial district up at the front. There would be the 75-foot buffers that the Maybank overlays and plans in the past have called for, and Maybank preservation of grand trees, of which there are a great number, particularly at the front around the Tattooed Moose. This is an image that shows the open spaces, and there would be a great range of open spaces around a pond feature here, adjacent to the Tattooed Moose, also around some of the grand trees, and then perhaps most importantly along the wetlands at the rear. So this publicly dedicated roadway would be adjacent to public green space, or adjacent to green space, excuse me. And the details of the PUD, roughly it's a 6.9 dwelling units an acre. So that's in line with the suburban recommendations of our current comprehensive plan. It's about 9 acres for the residential district, which is a net of 6.9, and the commercial district is about 1.568. And then there are about 2 acres of wetlands. I'll let Ms. Harp go into the condition here and any other details that she would like to bring forth from the TRC analysis of this site.
Harp, you go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. As Christopher said, there are 58 units planned for this, or proposed for this development. And along with the plan unit development document that you received, there's also a concept plan. And I wanted to remind you that the concept plan, so you will be approving the plan unit development and the concept plan. The concept plan will have to return to TRC for preliminary plat and road construction review. So it is not just because approving the PUD does not mean, in the concept plan does not mean that you're approving the subdivision. You're approving the concept along with the document. The condition, as Christopher mentioned, the parking for the Tattooed Moose, they cannot provide the parking on the site. The parking is based on patron use area, and their lot, it is not large enough to provide the parking that is required. So they are in the process of entering with an agreement with the parcel across the road, and they will have to provide to the city in order for us to, before we can approve the preliminary plans or TRC plans, they will have to provide approval from Charleston County for that parking lot, a 10-year parking lease between the owners of the 2 parcels, and a parking rider. That all of this has to be approved by the zoning administrator. And that parking lot must be completed prior to approval of the final subdivision plat. So if you have any questions, please let me know. But we recommend approval with that condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harp. Do we have, I apologize, do we have the applicant here with us?
Yes, sir. This is Andrew Todd Burke with HLA.
Okay, thank you, sir. You go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, first I want to thank Christopher and Anna for doing a great job introducing the project. Also, all the members of the TRC team as we worked this out pretty thoroughly, a lot of back and forth. And honestly, they did a really great job presenting it. I guess in particular, if you wanted to go to that, that rendering, we were happy with the way that the interconnecting road came out up against the wetlands there. So there are wetlands in the rear of all of these individual properties. They will, come together to create this plan, and we were able to work around the wetlands. So we are not filling any of them. They will all remain intact, and they're doing a great job collecting water in this basin. This is in an SPA, a special protection area of the city, and we were able to work with the TRC team and the stormwater department to make sure that our development will help that basin. And we're happy of the parkway-like feel that this interconnected road has, with a 6-foot path on one side of the road that hopefully will get connected on adjoining properties and be a part of the Johns Island Greenway plan, as it has an area or a line that runs through this area. And that's pretty much it. We're really excited to keep this going and get our road construction plans done. And we are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your explaining that to us and your comments. I see there's no one signed up to speak or written comments, either in favor or opposed. So this will close the public aspect of this. I'd ask any commission members that have questions, comments, or motion.
See, Ms. Jacobs has her hand up.
Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have several questions before we consider a motion here. Well, there was a mention in the PUD that there'll be an inspection of this commercial restaurant when it's annexed into the city. And I wondered if that was standard practice for a business that was in the county being brought into the city, and if there would be any, interruption of service to that restaurant while those things were happening.
Morgan, who's going to answer that?
Ms. Hart, are you familiar with that requirement in the PUD?
I'm not. I'm going to look right now.
And Andrew, do you remember if was that for a fire inspection, or what kind of inspection was that?
That's a good question. I believe that language was given to us by the TRC team. But Ms. Jacobs, just in general, the plan is, as we develop our construction documents, as far as interruption of the business, obviously there will be a slight interruption just with the nature of building a road through what is now the parking lot for the Tattooed Moose. However, we are going to be working very closely with the owner, as we have been throughout this process, as you would imagine, in order to have as little interruption as possible, so you can still have patrons being able to come in and out in a safe manner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, what other questions?
I have kind of a little bit of a list, if y'all will indulge me, please. I'm going to jump.
I'll tell you what, Ms. Jacobs, why don't you go ahead and read us the concerns, and then we'll let staff address them, if that's okay.
Okay. The street that is the future connectivity street along the wetland, I know we've looked at some other situations where we're piecemealing in development with the street ultimately being a connective street. And I just want to make sure that it is designed such that it would be pedestrian and bike friendly, since ideally that's how people would move along these back areas, since they wouldn't be out on Maybank Highway. So I just want to assure through the TRC process that gets considered. And also, I don't see on the front of the property a good multimodal path, and I sort of have a little bit of a memory that's part of the Maybank Highway overlay zoning, so I would like to have that addressed. There's a table on page 5 of the PUD that talks about the area breakdown, and there's 6 areas listed with total acreage, and that acreage does not add up to the 10.636. It adds up to like 14 acres, and I didn't know why there was that discrepancy, because obviously calculations of open space and usable open space are used moving forward. Let's see. When we talk about usable green space, and it seems to be there's wording in this PUD that this would be under the operation of the homeowners association there, or the property owners association, which kind of indicates this might be private open space. But if you look at the concept plan, there's a little bit of the acreage up by the restaurant and and that new parking lot that they're looking at, as well as immediately posterior to the restaurant. And I was just curious as to whether that would be really allowed for public use, because people coming to the restaurant might enjoy, the public space there. There is discussion on page 10 in the PUD of wetland buffers, and I've been attending a pretty big series of webinars on coastal wetland buffers presented by the DNR, Clemson, ACE Basin, and Sea Grant. And they're really talking about very modern wetland buffers. And since that's a pretty significant piece of wetland there, I would encourage whoever I can encourage to look at modern wetland buffers there, since there is a road right next to it. And the existing signage on page 17 that they refer to for the commercial restaurant, will it be grandfathered in? I don't know if that meets our current DRB standards for our commercial corridors. And I would just hate to see the restaurant have to completely redesign their sign. So I just want to make sure there's language that might protect that for that existing restaurant. And those are essentially my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. All good questions. Mr. Morgan, how would you like to handle this?
I wonder if Mr. Todd Burke would like to answer some of those questions because of the detailed nature of them.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you. So the interconnected road is, as I mentioned just in the brief preamble, is definitely planned to have up against the wetland side, a 6-foot path for bike and pedestrian. We would have liked to have it be a little bit larger in width. However, due to the proximity of the wetlands and the sensitivity, as you just mentioned, Ms. Jacobs, the grading, we didn't want to get too close to the grading to that. As far as, putting fill near the wetlands. As I mentioned, we're not going to be disturbing any of it. And the other alternative would be to build a retaining wall in the right of way, which the city engineering department was not supportive of. So this was essentially to get a nice soft grade and widest path we could. That's how we addressed that. But yeah, we certainly actually worked with Eric Schultz in the TRC department. He brought to our attention that there was the Johns Island Greenway plan showed a path that ran through this area, and that's kind of the genesis of how we came to that. As far as the overlay buffer, so this is part of what the county has approved, and to my knowledge, we've been working from the very beginning with Christopher and the zoning staff in general in order to mimic what the county has planned and since approved, because the city is intending to do something very similar, so that this corridor has a cohesive feel, whether or not you're in the city or the county. So this is part of the county's, I believe they call it the limited commercial area. So it's a 75-foot buffer with a 5-foot walkway. And then their mixed use nodes, the more intensive nodes, which this is not a part of, has a 10-foot walkway and a 15-foot buffer. So we are, within the PUD, we are, the language is exact to what the county overlay district is as far as that buffer on Maybank Highway. The table with the numbers, I can address. That was a TRC request, and the math is not wrong. It's just funny math because there's overlays in between those areas. So those areas aren't used to tabulate or calculate anything. It's taken a bit out of context on this sheet. But when you go through the PUD itself, there are areas in which you can clearly see we've broken things out that add up to numbers that are appropriate. So HOA areas include some areas of wetlands and buffers and so there's overlap within those numbers. However, the planning staff wanted these specific areas broken out, so that's what they got. And then the open space, so there's a couple other ones. So as far as wetland buffers go, we have because we are not proposing to fill any wetland buffers, we don't have any wetland buffers from OCRM or the Army Corps of Engineers. However, the new stormwater manual, as it got passed, has some kind of grading buffers that we have to adhere to. So that's the extent that we have on our site as far as the buffers from the wetlands. And then the sign, the intent of the language, and this was also worked through with the owner of the Tattooed Moose as well as the TRC department, would be to keep the sign. So it says the sign for the existing restaurant and bar shall remain in its current location. That's direct out of the PUD. So the idea being that language would be strong enough to be able to keep that sign in place.
And see, that's where my problem was. It says you can keep the sign in this location, but is the existing sign acceptable? It was just a very subtle use of language there that made me question it. In other words, they could keep a sign there, but can they keep this sign there? I just wanted to make sure that language was appropriate for them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess being that it was worked out with, with the members of TRC, I was hoping that it would be, but I certainly see your point. But yeah, the intention from all parties is to have the current sign remain. And I think that answered your question, except maybe there was some open space questions.
Open space being public-private, because it's sort of
Right.
because open spaces seems to be under an HOA or property owners association, sort of indicates that the open space is private. But if you look at that particular diagram that's right there, there's a little triangle right up there by the road, essentially at the Tattooed Moose. There's
Right.
land all the way around the restaurant. And so I just didn't want there to get to be some kind of angst between private property owners and a commercial venture about that. And I was just curious how that was going to be handled.
Yeah, so we actually worked with the staff, the planning staff, pretty extensively about, creating a neighborhood around, this existing restaurant and, kind of how that would work. And so we will have a buffer as well as a privacy fence around there. But as far as the open space goes, the open space is technically private land.
Okay.
It's not being given to the city, right? Because if it was public land, then the city would have maintenance responsibilities. So in order to keep the responsibilities of maintenance to the property owners association, whether it be commercial property or the residential property, it is private land. However, the intent is for it to be used by, members of the community. And there's public land intersecting it. So I guess in my experience, when we do, this project or other projects, is that while it is private land, the intent is for, people to be able to utilize it. So, if you were, hopefully this road gets connected and there's a greenway situation, you could ride your bike to the Tattooed Moose and maybe have some lunch and then go and enjoy, the viewing deck over the pond for a few minutes before you head back. That's kind of how I've seen it utilized and being used. But yeah, I mean, the city does not request, nor would I imagine they want the land to be public land and thereby assume maintenance responsibilities.
I understand. I was just particularly looking at that tiny little triangle that was up there that just seemed awkward. Surely that's not going to get fenced in up there.
No.
Yeah,
But
okay.
up in the front there, that was actually requested to be as part of the open space, or maybe even part of the buffer, I think it was. But it was essentially an area that will remain open and not built upon as that road kind of bisected the property.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attention to my questions.
Absolutely.
Donna, thank you for paying such good attention to this application and your questions. And Andrew, thank you for your responses. Other commission members, questions, comments, or a motion?
Ms. Limpis has her hand raised.
Lampesis, you go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie. My two questions are about parking. I don't see, or if you could point out, Andrew, any additional parking or overflow parking in any parts of the neighborhood. We have an issue with townhomes and not having additional parking, and that's been part of our 10-year plan that we've been working on. And especially with the Tattooed Moose there, if townhome people want to have a get together, is there any more parking other than what is on the site?
So as the person with the cursor has been indicating, there is on-street parking to meet or exceed one parking space per 3 units within the community. And that's being met with the on-street parking there, as well as at least 2 parking spaces on each individual lot, as is standard for the residential parking requirements. So yeah, we worked with Lee Batchelder on coming up with a good ratio for parking on street, and we decided upon one, or he decided and let us know that it was going to be one per 3. And then in addition, there was some concerns about, well, what if the users of the Tattooed Moose would want to park in those spots, thereby not leaving them available for the homeowners? And what we came up with, and the engineering and traffic and transportation department agreed upon, was that we could put signs, and we can't physically keep people from parking there, but They will allow us to put signs in the right of way stating that the on-street parking within the development is for, the homeowners of Brett's Cove and not for the Tattooed Moose patrons. So we thought that that was probably the best feasible option we could do to secure those spots for the homeowners rather than patrons of the restaurant.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, and this is, I think, for Mr. Morgan, what happens after the 10 years for parking if there's a 10-year lease? What happens for that restaurant going forward?
And 10 years is normal for us whenever there are parking situations, like at the BZA, they always require a 10-year lease. And the assumption is that, a new one could potentially be worked out, but zoning isn't necessarily requiring that beyond the 10-year lease. I would imagine in 10 years, you're going to see some other changes in this area, like this parcel that's at the front over here that's not part of this PUD could very well be redeveloped. And, in 10 years, there could be some mass transit out here and other houses developed nearby that, create more folks who are able to walk to things and more connectivity, things like that.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lampasas. Any other commission members, questions, comments, or motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of this PUD.
Okay, Ms. Jacobs moves for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Lampasas second. So motion by Ms. Jacobs, second by Ms. Lampasas. And unless there's any other comments, we'll do a roll call vote.
Miss, can I just ask, is that with the condition of staff's recommendation?
Yes, sir.
Jacobs? Yeah, so with conditions.
10-year park.
Thank you. So we're going to do a roll call vote. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Harrison?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Aye, in favor.
Thank you. I don't believe Ms. Johnson is with us. If she is, she'll let me know. Ms. Lampasas?
Aye, in favor.
Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Great. I'm in favor as well, so that's 6 in favor and none opposed. So that application passes. The next item on the agenda is development agreement number 1, Laurel Island Peninsula TMS 418-000006, 4500000013, 45902-00013, 4611, 303, 024, 100, 101, 102, 464, 124, 006, 023, and 038, approximately 352.35 acres. Request approval of a development agreement between the City of Charleston, Charleston County, LRA Promenade LLC, LRA Promenade North LLC, and LIDOZI LLC. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to kind of point out that, of course, you all know that you don't see a lot of development agreements very often. They do come through. Typically, our legal folks help us with these, and Mr. McQueenie is going to be on the line today to help us with some of the details here. I'm going to give just a general overview. You all are, of course, very familiar with Laurel Island because you had the PUD before you last year. The development agreement does cover a little bit more land because the state requires, I believe it's about 350 acres to get the 25-year development agreement. Mr. McQueenie can give you the details on that, but I'm going to show you the parcels that will be involved in this development agreement. Before we get into it any further, though, I do want to point out to the public and to the commission that there will be an additional public hearing before City Council on this development agreement on August 17th, 2021. That's going to be at the Daniel Island Recreation Center at the regular council meeting on August 17th, 2021. And that is part of the state law in reference to development agreements that we announced at the Planning Commission meeting that there will be an additional public hearing. Just to go through some slides here, of course, you all are most familiar with the PUD parcels. These are the parcels that are part of the Laurel Island PUD, and they are here on the Laurel Island or landfill site here, as well as the adjoining County Recycling Center and some other adjoining properties along Morrison Drive. They're also within this development agreement to reach the acreage that is needed for the development agreement are some other park or green spaces that are part of this development agreement. And Mr. McQueenie can talk about how the city is interrelating these two. But the first is the West Ashley Bikeway properties that are outlined here going across West Ashley. And these are properties that are owned by the city. And then the Morris Island property, which is a preserved green space on the coastal Atlantic Ocean here at the mouth of Charleston Harbor. The development itself is outlined with a phasing plan by virtue of this development agreement. And I think that will help you all feel comfortable about a lot of the aspects of the PUD, the time frame, that aspects of the PUD that you all were very interested in seeing, having those be delivered as part of the development agreement and the actual development progression on the site. I'm just going to show these. And again, Mr. McQueenie can go into these in more detail, or the development team when they talk, but these were the slides that they sent us as part of the progression of the phasing. And you have here just the overall layout of the development itself with the public park amenity here along the southern end. And then we have progression into phase 2. So you have phase 1 and phase 2 here. And in phase 2, you gain the park 2 and you gain the park 3, as well as other areas along the edge of the wetlands and water areas here. And then we go into phase 3, which is also incorporating Park 4, which is more of an active park, and Park 5. And then we go into phase 4, which has Park 6 and Park 7 and the completion of the overall pedestrian path. And again, I'll let the development team go more into those details. And here are the phase boundaries for you. So our recommendation of this is for approval, and I will let Mr. McQueenie kind of give the details that he would like to give now.
Sure. Thank you, Christopher. And I'm happy to answer any questions as things proceed. But just to remind everyone, City Council adopted the PUD for this in October of 2020. It's sort of performance-based zoning in that the ability to develop and the uses are based on PM traffic impact, which was the suggested sort of mechanism in the traffic study prepared by the developer at the time. I think there's a cap on dwelling units of 7,750. I think I mentioned 7,250 the other night, but it's 7,750. That's under the PUD. Under the PUD, 10% of all dwelling units on the property from the time of a first certificate of occupancy or completion through the end of time, unless there's an amendment to the PUD, 10% have to be affordable workforce housing units. In addition, for a period of 10 years after a CO or certificate of completion is pulled for any number of units, 10% of those, or 10% on a total of 10% on the within the PUD have to be affordable workforce housing. They can also build retail and commercial and utilize it for other purposes. Going back to the sort of off-site situation, so state law, and I don't particularly care for this aspect in terms of especially urban areas. So state law, if you have over 25 acres of high land property, you can enter into a development agreement with a local government that basically vests your rights for 5 years. In order to get to a 10-year vested right, you need to have, I think it's over 250 acres, not 250 acres or more, but over 250 acres. And I actually went through, especially the city-owned properties, which are the West Ashley Bikeway and the Morris Island property, to confirm the acreage. I looked at the most recent surveys for the PUD properties, and I don't think I did an exact count. I got to over 250, and that was what I was concerned with, is be over 250. The Morris Island property was actually owned by a related entity to the developers and donated to, I believe it was a land trust that eventually, and that land trust eventually conveyed it to the city. So that's the tie to that property. And then the the West Ashley bike path, the developers agreed to donate $100,000 towards the duck and turtle pond contemplated within the bike path to create a nexus. There's no litigation in South Carolina on development agreements, so there's no contiguity requirement or anything like that. I think we've done a good job of identifying properties that are tied to the property. We looked for properties closer, and there really just wasn't a workable option to get to the 250 acres. There's no planned development beyond what's permitted on both city properties. I think Morris Island, I think there's certain very limited passive recreational uses that are permitted. And then the West Ashley Bikeway has sort of a plan in place of how it's supposed to be developed as a recreational bikeway. Nothing in the development agreement would alter that. It would technically, the development agreement vests the zoning for those properties, but I don't think it'll ever be a situation. I wouldn't contemplate that either of those properties will ever get to a situation because of restrictive covenants and otherwise, where they're trying to reach their highest and best use on the private market. So, but we haven't locked in any development rights for those properties. Those dwelling units allocated. The development agreement says they can't use any portion of these properties towards their open space requirements for the PUD or for their affordable housing requirements. I don't foresee any affordable housing being built on either of these properties, but if the city decided to, and it was consistent with the covenants, they wouldn't get a credit towards affordable housing on these properties. I try to think of even things that won't happen, but so that's sort of the tie-in to these offsite properties, is I call them. City staff, I think, has spent 4 or 5 months kind of going back and forth with the developer internally about different issues, including this one. There's the money aspect and the traffic and transportation aspect, which are covered in the public infrastructure improvements agreement that I'll talk about in a minute. The two kind of issues that were primary to everyone, I think, were the parks and recreation aspect within the PUD, and both on the island and on the properties off the island, and the ability to provide fire and EMS or emergency access to the island. There is an active CSX line separating the island, not the island, but a portion of the property from the rest of the peninsula of Charleston. In response to the fire department's concern, the developer agreed to donate land to construct a new fire station on the island. And I think that comes at phase 4 when the city can identify the funding for that. And you'll see the potential location that needs to be agreed upon between the city and the developer. The site will be at least 1 acre, and it will include all drainage infrastructure we need to construct the fire station. There is an option, if the parties agree later on, that if the fire station is located on like a ground level, or if it's a 2-story fire station, I believe we have one downtown, that it could be within a new building. So if they're going to build like a parking garage overhead or something like that, the city could agree in the future to do it that way as opposed to a standalone fire station. In the meantime, Christopher has the marker of where a temporary fire station may be located. Obviously, that's important to have on the other side of the tracks to serve the initial development. The plan for the first up to 30% of the development is to serve Romney Street, which is an existing right-of-way onto the island, to serve as the primary access point. one thing about the island that's very important, especially the island property, that's very important to note is it's a former landfill. You're not going to build single family residential homes all over this property or anywhere on this property, very likely. The developer, I think Rhett Reidenbach, the engineer for the developer, sort of described the building of the island as is creating a platform. So it's going to, you're going to start from Romney Street and you're going to move the platform out as you go on. That is important for a lot of reasons, but especially because it's not, you're not going to be able to just use all this open space that a landfill was once on while you build the rest of the property. That was an idea I threw around early on, and that's not really a viable option. So the developer is providing park property. I know I'm told from people that the community, the existing community is sort of underserved recreationally. It was important to Lori Yarborough, especially, to have some activated open spaces that they could program. And we have this sort of temporary park marker because the ball fields that are part of the open space plan in the HUD are located, I think, in phase 3 or 4, but they're to the north of where Brigade Street would come across. So there will be an opportunity to have recreational programs before you get to later phases. The developer will construct the parks. The parks will be conveyed to the property by to the city by limited warranty deed to maintain after a 2-year maintenance agreement, which is just like dedicating a street right of way in the city. So they'll post a bond, they'll sign our warranty agreement for completed park improvements or any improvements that will be dedicated to the city. Streets under our dedication manual will require a general warranty deed, and that stays the same. But the 2-year bond requirement, I think it's 10% of the costs will be bonded, and then the liability didn't shift to the city until 2 years after the dedication. The second entrance will be the bridge coming across Coolblow or extending from Coolblow onto the island. Again, this is all going to go south and north for those reasons. And then Brigade Street, I think at about 60%, somewhere in there, of the total build out would be the final entrance onto the island. And that's when you get into the Park 4 active park. The plan, the public improvements agreement and the development agreement both call for a dog park, playground on site, ball fields on site, just because of the nature of the development. These are going to be for Charleston tall buildings, or some of the island is going to contain tall buildings for Charleston. The pedestrian wharf, crabbing dock, same thing, and be dedicated to the city and accepted by the city, 2-year maintenance agreement, et cetera. So I think Parks and Recreation seems to be fairly well satisfied with that plan. The applicant I know has worked with, I think specifically the Historic Charleston Foundation on how to deal with the 2 historic sites on the island at part number 2 and near part number 7 to sort of their cultural resources survey basically says that the sites aren't savable sites. I mean, you're not going to be able to rebuild or excavate or do anything like that with those sites. So that I think the idea is to emphasize the location of the sites and what's there so that people can access, specifically the public can access and see those sites and read about them, both in using the bike pedestrian path, which again will be public, and the Park 2 and Park 7, which is where the 2 sites will be located. The public infrastructure improvements agreement is a big component of this. I don't know that those typically go through the Planning Commission for recommendation. Magnolia, I think it was adopted separately from the development agreement. We've sort of included it as it's part of one package because it's the way a lot of the public infrastructure, and I don't think it'll be anywhere near all of the public infrastructure will be paid for. The pie agreement I don't know how much people are knowledgeable about TIF districts, but essentially the increment from the development of properties within the Morrison Drive tax increment financing district can be used by the developer, city, others to pay for public improvements, and they have to be publicly owned or publicly maintained improvements. They can't be for private groups or private HOAs, any of that stuff. The developer, I think, is shown that the cost of public infrastructure will greatly exceed the increment, and the increment is the difference between what the property is generating now, or properties are generating now as far as property taxes, versus what they're going to generate based on the development of the properties. There is some tax revenue from these properties now, but not very much. And obviously that'll go up significantly. But the Morrison Drive TIF district is sort of divided into three, what Jeremy Cook would call buckets for purposes of tax increment financing. The first bucket is increment generated from the Morrison Yard properties that will go to certain public infrastructure improvements in that area. The second bucket is revenue generated from the Laurel Island properties, and will go to public improvements, mostly on Laurel Island and Laurel Island properties that will be dedicated to the public, but also offsite in the sort of neighborhoods nearby dealing with traffic. The third bucket is all other properties that are in that TIF district, and that will, I think, $650,000. The first $650,000 will be set aside for the city to use for recreational improvements. Singleton Park is kind of the primary recreational improvement we contemplate. That is owned by Dominion Energy, so we have left some flexibility if for some reason, I think we're leasing that from Dominion. If for some reason we can't use the monies towards Singleton Park, we could use it elsewhere in the area. The important part is it's used for parks. There'll be also sidewalk improvements and drainage improvements in the streets around, in the neighborhood around that area, utilizing that $650,000. Again, it's flexible how we can use it, because, we're not sure what's going to be required to, what's going to be needed to deal with the development. That'll be those public infrastructure traffic improvements offsite we dealt with through a traffic study, and likely a great deal of the tax increment revenue will go towards those traffic improvements. So, I read through this, I think Monday before the real estate meeting again. I took a vacation last week, and I was pretty proud of the way the development agreement read in the pie agreement. I thought it was a good deal for the city. We covered a lot of bases that haven't necessarily been covered in previous ones, like environmental dedication of property with environmental issues. We get a certificate of completion. The dedication process itself is locked in, which we don't always lock in, especially for parks in development agreements. And the pie agreement sort of deals with all the public infrastructure improvements. And that third bucket, over $650,000, would be used for off-site traffic improvements that will serve the Laurel Island development. And we don't want another bridge to nowhere situation. And I think most of staff's general feeling is that this will improve the adjacent neighborhoods in terms of traffic and layout. And it will do that without displacing existing residents, which is very important. And it'll create one of the biggest opportunities for affordable housing we've had. I don't know if it's the biggest, but it may be, in at least since I've been here. So overall, I think this is a good thing. And I recommend it, but I'm happy to answer any questions after that. I know we'll have a public hearing as well. Thank you, Mr. McQueenie, for all that updates and all that information. It's a lot of stuff, and
it's a big piece of property, so it's an important piece. Who else are we going to hear from? Anybody else from staff? Chris, are we?
You're muted, Christopher.
There we go. Sorry. I think that's it from our staff side. I think the development team wanted to present to you all. I do see Ms. Jacobs has her hand up though.
Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead if you had a question right now.
Just a very quick question. This is on our agenda. It says that it's 352 acres, but Mr. McQueenie kept referring to the development agreement needing 250 acres. So I didn't know if I misunderstood something there.
It's Highland. So the trigger under state law
Okay.
is Highland, and the total acreage is probably Highland and wetland property. But I've gone through the figures because it's pretty close to the 250. And I'm comfortable. I haven't done the wetland surveys myself, but other than that, I'm comfortable that we're over the 250.
I just wanted to make sure I was hearing correctly. Thank you.
Ms. Jacobs is watching those numbers tonight, and she's adding them up, so that's good. Who are we going to hear from? Mr. Clement, Mr. Bello, Allison? Who are we going to hear from the development team?
Mr. Chairman, it's Robert Clement.
Robert, I'm going to just say, you know, we talked about this before, and I think you spent your entire life on this project. I think last time I commented that you spent a long time, and you said when you first started you weren't married. Now you got married and 4 kids. So we'll hear from you, and we appreciate your patience on this.
Yeah, it's facts are stubborn things. Thank y'all all for joining tonight and participating, and thank you for the incredible job that y'all do. I don't have really anything to add to Chip or to Christopher. I think they did a fantastic job of explaining a complicated situation, but we're very excited. We think that we do have a first-class development agreement and public infrastructure agreement. It was a complicated thing, but I think that they made it relatively simple by breaking it into 3 buckets and applying it to those specific locations. But I've got my whole team here. We'll take questions as needed, and rather than me give you any more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. I think we have 2 comments only from Mr. Olay and Mr. Turner. Are those written comments, or those they're going to be with us?
They're both here.
Okay, great. Who's ever ready, you'll go ahead. Thank you.
All right. I'll allow Mr. Lay to talk first. So go ahead when you're ready.
Mr. Olay, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and Planning Commissioners. Cashton Drole, Historic Charleston Foundation. A 196-acre site, Laurel Island is one of the largest developments ever undertaken on the peninsula. HCF has worked strategically with the development team to influence the plans for the development. Consequently, Laurel Island will make one of the largest investments in permanent workforce housing in the city to date, and public green space was made a priority as part of the planned unit development district for Laurel Island. Tonight's public hearing represents one of the first steps in the process for this development agreement. The agreement is a legally binding agreement for the city that defines a set of vested rights for the development of the island, and HCF is grateful to be a participant in this discourse. HCF has encouraged that the development agreement prioritizes parks and green space, even in the first phase of development, and commits to flooding, traffic, and streetscape improvements off of Laurel Island throughout the life of the agreement. The parks that will be built on the island will create meaningful public access to the water and allow for historic interpretation of 2 cultural sites on the island, ruins of the Robert Mills designed powder magazines and the remains of a property formerly owned by Standard Oil. While not specifically addressed in the phased build out of the island, yet addressed in the PUD, phase 1 of the Laurel Island development will include construction of 200 units of workforce rental housing that will remain affordable in perpetuity. HCF has been a strong advocate for accessible housing for many years, and this project will add significantly to the affordable housing stock available on the peninsula. We look forward to continued work with the development team as ensuring high quality design and infrastructure, as well as protection of cultural resources at the site, continue to be a priority for HCF. Thank you to the Commission for the opportunity to comment this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Rolay, for your comments. Mr. Turner, whenever you're ready, sir.
Good evening,
Turner,
Chairman
you are.
Karish and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Brian Turner, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Preservation Society of Charleston tonight. At the outset, we'd like to express our gratitude to the whole Laurel Island team for coming to our offices and providing us key updates as this development agreement has taken shape. We've encouraged them, as we encourage all of you, that broad public awareness of this process is critical. The agreement will guarantee a developer a significant allocation of public funding for one of the most impactful projects in Charleston in a generation. Once approved, the city and its taxpayers will be clearly invested, and to this end, broad community engagement is critical. Regarding the substance of the agreement, we're pleased to see that the new funding will be generated for beneficial projects like the West Ashley Bikeway, multiple new public parks, as well as updates to Singleton Park. And the terms do not diminish commitments we push for in the PUD approval process to incorporate affordable housing using seamless design principles to ensure that housing is integrated into the project to the same quality. One point needing clarification is how design principles governing the Laurel Island Board of Architectural Review will be approved. The PUD suggests that the City Board of Architectural Review has this responsibility, but clause 12B2 of the proposed development agreement suggests that approval authority rests with the design review board. We support the approach taken in the PUD and believe that the agreement needs to be revised to ensure a predictable public process, as the guidelines will be critical for ensuring a successful project. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I'll look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, and I know that both of you are Mr. Rolay and Mr. Turner's organizations. This project's going to even be a better project because y'all's participation, but who's going to answer Mr. Turner's question? Mr. McQueenie, Mr. Morgan?
It will be the Mr. Chairman. This is Mr. McQueenie. I think the developer and I have traded emails, but it will be the BAR. That was a Scrivener's error in the document. I'll make sure that the final version that's considered by council makes reference to the BAR. That was just an oversight, but we're already on top of that.
Charlie, I think you might have muted.
Mr. Clement, would you like to say anything else since there were comments? If not, we'll close the public aspect.
No, sir, we have no comments.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clement, and that'll close the public aspect of this item on the agenda. Questions, comments, or motions by commission members?
Mr. McQueenie has his hand up.
Who's that, Mr. McQueenie?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. McQueenie.
Yes, sir. And I apologize. I'm being a stickler for the rules. So our ordinance provides that the chairperson has to announce the time, location, and date of the next public hearing at the close of the public hearing. And I can, if somebody wants to share the screen, I've got the advertisement. If Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to read that right off the advertisement,
that'd be fine.
I can put that up.
Yes. So an additional public hearing before City Council on this item regarding the proposed development agreement we held August the 17th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Again, that's August 17th, 2021 at 5 p.m.
Yes, sir. And it's at the Daniel Island Recreation Center, 165 Fairbanks Drive.
Great. Daniel Island Recreation Center. Thank you, Mr. McQueenie.
Thank you, sir. I apologize.
No, we appreciate you keeping us straight, that's all. Any comments, questions, motions by commission members?
Mr. Chairman?
Jacobs, you go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the hard work by staff, the legal team, and this development group to put together this document. I read it, and I do have a few minor questions and a couple major questions. I'm particularly appreciative of this phasing plan that shows in detail how the island will be phased in and coordinated. I'm especially appreciative of this permanent workforce housing and the statement you have on page 8 that you're going to locate it throughout the island and just not located in one place. I'm excited to hear that Parks worked so hard to make the commitment to get the space, the parks additionally phased in and work with the development team on that. And one question though I wasn't clear on, as you develop each phase, will there be a percentage of workforce housing done during each of these phases? I might have missed some of these things that are in the document. I'm sorry.
And Ms. Jacobs, again, if it's okay with you, I'd like you just to get all your questions and then we'll get staff to answer them, or whoever's appropriate, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. That's fine, because some of these are tiny questions. One is on page 8, there's a reference to mining operations, and I'm wondering if that's just a typographical error. Because there's a reference to mining operations on the island, and I don't think that that was intent to be.
What else?
And I was also curious, this is another question, as to why the improvements of these duck turtle ponds were made specific when actually the acreage was looked at, the city owned, of the entire greenway, and maybe we shouldn't be quite so specific out there because there's great opportunities along the greenway, and I didn't know if there was a reason for that specificity with respect to the ponds. This is more just making sure I understand this because I think I heard Mr. McQueenie explain this, but I want to repeat it to see if I understand it. These public, like our public roads and our public parks, are going to be initially phased in by the developer. There's going to be some financial mechanism to access through bond or bucket of this TIF money to replace a developer for these public spaces. Is that my understanding of this? And they will be used during this 2-year period they have to maintain these, potentially using these TIF monies. And then will the city have access to those TIF monies for continued improvements, or will they go into other buckets for other things? I just want to make sure I understand that, because it is a complicated process.
Any
And
other
then,
questions?
and then one last large question. Is there a very specific legal reason that we have to put in the Century 5 plan as a city plan in this document? Because we're so close to this new city plan adoption that I find it with a lot of heartburn that we're going to make a 25-year development agreement on a 10-year-old plan that is getting ready to change council. And I'd really like to have a robust discussion about why that would exist. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Mr. Morgan, Mr. McQueenie, can you handle those questions first?
Do you want to start, Chip?
Yeah, I think I can do so. I don't think I have everything written down, but the workforce housing. So if there's a dwelling unit out there, 10% of it has to be work. No, but from the get-go, there can't be dwelling units on this island if 10% aren't workforce housing. And again, that's to the end of time. Also, for 10 years after that first batch arrives, 10% of those have to be workforce housing, and so on. And so there's always an additional 10% running. I believe it's from the CO. So if you have, 500 dwelling units built in, phase 4 in 2035, and this is under the PUD, not the development agreement. From 2035 to 2045, 10% of those, 10% of those have to be permanent, and 10% from 2035 to 2045, you have to have that 10% as well. So that's how the workforce housing works. I forget what the the mining operations, I think that's left over from I think the last development agreement I did was the ones related to the North Charleston annexation war up on Ashley River Road, and the True Luck property had existing mining operations there. And my best guess is that I did not eliminate that as a use in this agreement, or did not catch that. But that's not
It's
I'll let
page
Mr.
3.
Clement
It's
speak
page,
if,
yeah, it's
okay.
page 3, section K, in case that's an inaccuracy, you can find it. quickly.
Okay. And
But that would just
I'll
be
make
kind
sure
of a
that gets
Scrivener's
out of
error,
there.
right? That would just be the kind of like a Scrivener's error there, right?
Yeah. Thank
It
you.
would be, yes. I'll make sure that is taken out. I do want to mention it's a
Can you hear
10-year vested right, not 25 years. Sorry, Robert.
Chip, hey, this is Red. I'm sorry, but yeah, that definition, that description of mining is in the definition of development, which is straight from the South Carolina Act.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
Okay.
It's just a standard definition for what the word development means.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's not a permit. That is a cut and paste of the state law definition of development. I apologize. I did want to mention it's a 10-year development, not a 25-year development agreement. And under state law, we're limited to 10 years. You'd have to get 2,500 or more acres to do 25 years. And I think Daniel Island may hit that, and Kanawha may hit that. Or it might be 1,000. I forget what the total amount is, but this does not hit those. The TIF dollars will be except for specific expenses that are designated to the city, like the $650,000 I spoke about. The improvements will be made by the developer using TIF funds and reimbursed. They'll advance the TIF the monies for those improvements and be reimbursed from the district buckets, assuming there's money available. If there's no money available, there's no money available. The comprehensive plan, state law includes vesting a comprehensive plan as part of the vested rights in the development agreement. And I had this come up, a question come up about this recently. I think Councilmember Jackson brought this up at the meeting. I don't really see, I kind of look at a development agreement as the comprehensive plan for a property, for, at least over the next 10 years. And we'll have an update under state law 10 years from now. And this development isn't going to be complete in 10 years. So we'll be looking most likely at extending this agreement at the same time and implementing any of those changes or the changes now. I've talked to Christopher. He believes that it currently conforms to the draft comprehensive plan. In South Carolina, a comprehensive plan is just not treated as a binding document on developers like zoning is. And there's no question that the zoning is going to be locked in. I will mention that stormwater offsite, and Matthew Felton approved the language, off the island itself, the other little island properties, the laws in effect at the time will apply. And Matthew Felton also explained that, the on-site, there's really no concern about upstream, downstream flooding, and our regulations now won't allow the developer to flood its own properties in the future. So that shouldn't be an issue, but all the implementation of the comprehensive plan is not going to be done for a lot longer than, September, hopefully September for the comprehensive plan. And none of that can change what's in the PUD once this development agreement is passed. I just don't see a reason to hold it up due to the comprehensive plan issue. If there were a huge substantive change, I might say consider it, but because we can't change the implementation of the plan as to the property, because otherwise the rights just wouldn't be vested. I just don't know. I've sort of racked my brain. I just don't know what we would get out of holding it up to incorporate a new comprehensive plan or an updated comprehensive plan.
And there's no way to just amend this once the plan goes in and put in the new plan. I understand the plan is not a binding document. It just seems a bad precedent to set in a 10-year-old plan in a document that's going to last for 10 years when we're just about ready to pass a new document. That's my big heartburn.
This is an idea that maybe the development agreement refers to the Century 5 plan and subsequent adopted citywide comprehensive plans, so that everybody knows that it's going to reference what gets adopted hopefully in September. And you know, as you were alluding to, you know, this checks all the boxes of the new citywide comprehensive plan, because it has the commitment to affordable housing, the unprecedented commitment to affordable housing, the green spaces around the edges, particularly the waterfront, so you get the public access to the water, the just all the aspects of the comprehensive plan, from the equity, from the resilience, all are covered with this development, and not only with the PUD and also with the development agreement. So, I mean, I feel fully confident in saying it is compliant with both the current plan and the future to be adopted plan.
McQueenie, would that work?
I am not opposed to it. It is an attorney and somebody who worked for a few very good attorneys that tend to find, you know, it's sort of the law of unintended consequences. I just don't like it to be subject to future things that aren't. I'd rather it just be locked into place. I don't have to grapple with a question that's sort of unforeseen now. There's a state law process for if there's changed circumstances and public health, safety, welfare are at risk, you can change the rights under a development agreement, or city council can, which I think should very rarely happen. But if there were some benefit from adding future comprehensive plan amendments, I'd be fine with it. I guess I'm leery just as an attorney, because I just feel like I don't want to get put in a situation where there's something I haven't thought about that we're going to have to grapple with, or somebody's going to put pressure on, you know, the developer who's operating under the current development agreement to comply with something, or state law changes and comprehensive plans become binding documents in the future. I just think outside the box. So it's a tough question.
So thank you, Mr. McQueenie. You gave us what you think, and I appreciate that. Ms. Jacobs, did we answer all the questions? Or?
I believe so.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for the questions, and thank you, Mr. McQueenie and Mr. Morgan. Any other questions, comments, motions by commission members?
Mr. Chairman.
Hussein, you go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to express my approval, and I will move for approval. And I will say, you know, I was supportive of this when the PUD came through in the fall last year, and I'm supportive of the development agreement, as I think it further ensures that this will actually come to pass, unlike some of the other plans for this property that we've seen over the years, over the previous decades. I'm, as many people said, and I will say it again, I'm very excited and grateful for the housing commitment that the development team has made. I think that, as I said earlier in this meeting, we really need to focus on addressing the needs of our community, both for workforce, affordable, and market rate housing. We need all of them in order to achieve the goals for our city that the comprehensive plan that Ms. Jacobs mentioned, the future plan lays out. And I'm also excited about the public space, both the on-site public space that we see here on this master plan map in front of us, but also the off-site spaces at Morris Island and on the West Ashley Bikeway. Both of those properties I have worked on in my career, and I'm really, really excited about achieving the goals that the city set out when those properties, you know, the planning for those parks were set out and have not been able to be achieved because of lack of funding. So that's exciting. And so, and in addition to not just what happens here at Laurel Island inside the red lines, but what it's going to do for the East Central neighborhood and for the Upper Peninsula of our city, making it a livable place. And those benefits will not just be for the people who live and work on Laurel Island, but for for everybody in the city, but most especially for those people who live nearby. So I think this is wonderful, and I will move for approval.
Well said, Mr. Lassane. Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Lassane. Is there a second? Other comments?
I'll second that motion, Charlie.
Thank you, Ms. Lampasas. I tell you, we'll do a roll call vote unless there's any other comments. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison? Harrison? Harrison?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Aye, in favor.
And I'm assuming Ms. Johnson is still not with us. Ms. Lampasas?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Great. I'm in favor. That's 6 in favor, none opposed to this application, so it passes. I tell you, when this gets done, as Mr. Lassane said, this is so exciting, but I think we're going to have to buy the first round for Mr. We'll have to buy the first round for Mr. Clement because he deserves it. And we want to do this for you as grandchildren, I think. So anyway, so thank you everyone on this. The next item on the agenda is zone, because we have a ordinance amendment which is deferred. So we'll go to zonings, number 1, 1349 and 1351 Ashley River Road, Washington Park, West Ashley, TMS number 418-05-00001 and 002. 0.53 acres, request zoning of GB, was zoned St. Andrews overlay in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And these properties are at the corner of Playground and Ashley River Road. Again, currently in Charleston County, and they're St. Andrews overlay. They are surrounded by general business zone properties. They are in the area that is designated for highway type uses in our current plan. So GB is definitely in line with that, as well as the surrounding zoning is. They currently have a car wash on the property that's at the very corner playground in Ashley River, and then a salon in an older structure on the parcel adjacent to it. I will show you, of course, they back up to the St. Andrews Park and Playground area here, and then to other commercial along Ashley River Road. Here it is shown in the highway designation in our current plan. And here are the parcels. Again, you see the car wash that is on the corner parcel and the older structure here that has the salon in it. And this would potentially be part of a larger development that would incorporate 4 parcels here that could be a gas station. They would go through the DRB review. They would have all the restrictions that are in our codes for distance and safety features from the park area for any kind of fuel pump related facilities. The staff is recommending approval of this based on the comprehensive plan and the surrounding land uses.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Does Mr. Taylor want to say anything? If not, I think he's the presenting, but I don't know if he wants to say anything, staff.
I promoted him to panelist, so he's able to unmute if he would like.
Taylor,
yeah, hey guys.
Go ahead.
Hey, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Hey, thank you, and thank you, members of the commission. I'm actually outside, so I apologize if there's background noise. Thank you guys for your time this evening. We coordinate with staff, DRB staff, and TRC staff are very interested in your project here. Of course, this annexation and zoning is
Taylor, we're not real clear, but we're assuming you're okay with their recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. We're sorry, we just don't have to. Thank you for being with us. I see there's no one signed up to speak and no written comments, so that'll close the public aspect of this. Is there a motion or questions from commission members?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval with the comment that council had deferred this for second reading last night because they had some concerns about a potential gas station being built on the site. But I believe that it's potentially a Parker's, which they do a grand job. And there was just some concerns of them backing up to the playground there, but I'm going to move for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Is the motion, is there a second, commission members?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sane. So there's a motion, a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison? Ms. Harrison?
Aye in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Aye in favor.
Ms. Lepsis?
Aye in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Sane.
Aye in favor.
Great, and I'm in favor, the 6 in favor and none opposed. The next item under zonings is 109 Magnolia Road, Ashley Forest, West Ashley, TMS number 418-1300132.13 acres, request zoning single and two family residential, STR, with zone mixed style residential, M12 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you'll see this block that the subject property is a real mix of zonings. The SR2 in the city, as well as the DR2, which is diverse residential. And then in the county, you've got some M12, which is their kind of mixed style or multifamily residential. This property has, I believe, a duplex on it. And so we are suggesting the STR, which would best accommodate the existing duplex on the site. And we have images that show the fact that it's in our suburban area, so that meets the density recommendations of the current plan. And then you have an aerial view of the current structure on the property. And we are recommending for the STR on the property.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And there's no one signed up to speak, opposed, no written comments. Is there comments? Is that a closed public aspect? Commission members, a motion or questions? Jacob,
I'll move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
And
thank
I'll
you, Ms.
second.
Jacobs.
And I'll
Ms.
second,
Lepsis is- Great, thank you. Ms. Jacobs moves for approval. Ms. Lepsis seconds. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye in favor.
Great. Ms. Harrison?
Aye in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Aye in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lepsis?
Aye in favor.
Great. Mr. Lasane?
Aye in favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so that's 6 in favor and none opposed. The last item on the agenda under zoning is number 32710, Pine Log Lane, Johns Island, TMS number 312-0000251, approximately 4.6 acres, requested zoning of diverse residential, DR6. It was zone R4 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
And this, of course, is Johns Island. This would be a connecting addition to the Whitney Lake development, which you see around here. This is Whitney Lake here in blue, and you can see how all of this area has been developed with comparably sized lots and development. This would allow for this triangular shaped parcel to have comparable development here under the DR6 designation, which is 6 units an acre. This is in our suburban area in our comprehensive plan. So that's in line with that because that's 4 to 8 units an acre. Some of the adjoining properties include undeveloped property or very low developed properties adjacent to this. I believe there's 1 unit on this triangular shaped piece of parcel and 1 or 2 further up Pine Log Lane. And then we have Pine Log cluster or conservation development that's up here. And then again, Whitney Lake is over in here. So it's in the midst of a good bit of additional development around it off of Murraywood Road on Johns Island. We have, I believe, here's the suburban designation from our current comprehensive plan. And here is an aerial image. Again, you see Whitney Lake adjacent to it and the lake itself here, and one structure on this parcel at present. And our recommendation is for approval here.
Great, thank you, Mr. Morgan. And again, I don't see anyone. Wait a minute, is there anyone that wants to say anything on this? I see some names listed. Does anyone want to say anything from the application?
Yeah, I've promoted Mr. Checketts, who's listed as presenting. So you have the ability to unmute, sir.
Great. Mr. Checketts, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me. I imagine everyone wants to leave. I think it's pretty obvious kind of what we're trying to do. Very similar, comparable homes to this property and what's already in that neighborhood. Basically just expanding it slightly, hoping to add 12 to 16 homes and then putting it in the city so it has the same services of what's already around there. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you for being with us and your time this evening, and we appreciate it. There's no one else signed up to speak for or against, so that'll close the public aspect of this. Commission members, motion, comments, questions?
I'll move for approval. Charlie.
Second.
Who's the second? I'm sorry, Miss.
Brian Jenkins.
Great, thank you. So Ms. Lempis has moved for approval, and Ms. Brian Jenkins seconds. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Brian Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lempis?
I in favor.
Hey, Mr. Lassane? Mr. Lassane?
Oh, my mute button wasn't working. I in favor.
Great, thank you. It's good to have you with us. And I'm in favor, so that's 6 in favor, none opposed, so this application passes. That completes the agenda for tonight. Chris, am I correct on that? There's nothing else on the
Yes, sir.
agenda?
That is it.
Great. So unless there's any other comments or questions, I certainly appreciate all the commission members' times and for this meeting. We appreciate it. And y'all have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
Night, everyone. Bye.